2020 has been a year of horrific loss, pain, fear, and confusion, but it has also been a year of standing up and demanding change across this country and around the world. Calls to racial injustice and violence against Black, Indigenous, and people of color have been resounding since the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor in the United States. And now we're just 3 days away from one of the most important elections in U.S. history. The issues of racism and discrimination are at the forefront. I'm now joined by Toronto activist and founder of Black Lives for Change, Yonathan Kristina, and from St. Louis, Missouri, Ezra Blair, also known as E2K chapter head of Remember the 400. Gentlemen, it's great to have you both on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Talk to me, E2K, what the last few months has been like for you in the United States.
Oh, wow. The last few months have been such a roller coaster ride for us. Here at Remember the 400, we have chapters all over in the U.S., in the U.K., and in Canada, which is our headquarters, founded by Shamrock Porter. But yeah, all the work that we usually have been putting in, we go into the schools, we go into the communities, and we talk with people, we talk with the youth. And so because of the last few months, you're talking COVID and isolation, it's led to us having to make adjustments in how we go into the communities without having to physically be there. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely been a roller coaster ride. But when you're talking about awareness and all the things that have been going on, especially after the unfortunate deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and others, the kind of awareness that's been causing this momentum to shift in everyone's perspective, I think has been a good thing.
Yonathan, talk to me about what you're seeing here in Canada. You have lived in the United States for a few years, but the calls here in this country are the same.
Yes, it's meant a lot, though. We've seen that vigorous culture shift, not just in our own community, but across GTA, Canada. The unity displayed at the protests that I've spoken at has only reassured me that we are all going towards the right direction to remove those racial barriers that have been instilled for, over the course of history. Mm-hmm. And it's beautiful. We've seen people of all cultures, races, genders, all unite for the same cause. And to tell you the truth, Angie, what touches me the most, touches my heart the most, is the fact that kids will reap the benefits of what we do here right now in 2020.
You talked about the removal of monuments, and we've seen that both in the United States and Canada. Yonathan, talk to me about that significance there and how important it is, how historic.
Yes, it's been inspirational just to watch that revolution start in the U.S. and then impact the entire world. One of the biggest revolutionary moments is right now. And in Canada, we've seen it because we have Black voices. We have BLM allies here pushing just as hard for equality in our own backyard, as well as helping our brothers and sisters in the U.S. But to see it all happening at the same time, it motivates me. It makes me more optimistic that a change is coming. And we're knocking on the doors of the government to support us now. It doesn't just start with, the statues, removal of the city name, street names, all those things. It's about erasing white supremacy and our past leaders from the history who've never supported people who look like me or E2K.
E2K, how important is it, as we talk about removing these monuments, is it to ensure that the history of what has happened over centuries is not lost, that it is known, that it is taught, and that it is never repeated?
Oh, of course. I mean, that is vital. When you're talking about moving forward, you have to know where you come from, right? You have to know where you come from, and you have to know where you are going. So I think it's very vital that we continue to educate and continue to inform people, keep people informed of the history of the last 400 years since the very first people of African descent landed here. I think that history is grand, and it extends well beyond slavery. I think all that information and all the contributions that Black Americans have made across the Americas, I think is important to understand and remember, because these are the things that are going to propel us forward. So information is key when we're talking about how we move as a country and just on this side in order to keep moving forward.
So talk to me then, E2K, more about now we're just 3 days away from an election. The resounding calls for change we've heard month after month after month. How critical is this election towards what you're asking for? And what is the difference between what you're seeing now to what the mobilization of getting more Black people out to vote that you saw in comparison to 2016?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I think this election is one of the biggest and most important elections that in my short years of life that I've seen. I know we've seen the 2008 election with Obama, and that was monumental, but I think this election is going to be larger, especially concerning the times. We are in a time in which racism is no longer swept under the rug, but this is something that we are continue to attack and continue to advocate against. So when you're talking about these outcomes, these political outcomes, I think when you're talking about voting and going into the polls, it's more important than ever because all the work that we've put in, we want to see beneficial outcome for our communities, bottom line.
Yonathan, how significant is it here in Canada?
Very. There's a fact, there are neighbors, and as we've seen in the past, the current president, with his international policies, along with him voicing how he views Canadians, it's tainted our relationship between the two countries. And so this election is not just going to deeply impact us here, but I think around the world. And the current president has listed many things he's done for the Black community, how he's helped empower us, but those actions have been polluted with his voice, with the negative things he said about just Black people in general. And either candidate has a lot on their plate, and I feel like, this is like what E2K said, this is very monumental, and it can change the course of history. So
do you think based on, some of the comments that have been made, the reactions that you've seen from the president, from other leaders as well, that the issue of racism and discrimination has moved from an issue of justice to a political one, Yonathan?
Yes. So what I was saying before is very similar. It's kind of tough because a lot of people say BLM is a political issue, but the fact is it's a human rights issue. And there's many Canadians here. We protest in the streets. We have sit-ins in front of police stations. Activists pushing just as hard, and it's very heartbreaking to see that many people are using this as a tool to gain more votes from the Black people. But what's really powerful is that the next person that we elect can right the wrongs that have been done for the last 400 years, or at least try and give the Black people an equal chance to live just like everyone else without having to fear walking down the street from police brutality, not getting a job.
E2K, what are your thoughts on this? You're there, you're right there on the ground. People have, now over 90 million Americans have already voted in this election. What are your thoughts here?
Well, I think when you're talking about racism, racism throughout the course of U.S. history has always been a political thing. When you're talking about the 60s, the 13th Amendment, all the way back to the Civil War, I think all those things can apply when we're analyzing this situation today. The movement, Black movements have always impacted political outcomes. So you can't ignore the fact that, yes, we are here on the grounds and we are marching for what we believe in. And so when you're talking about even the Fortune 500s and the big companies having to take a stand on Black Lives Matter, I think those kind of changes have definitely impacted how we view racism, because I think racism, the conversation can never end. These things cannot end. So when you're talking about is it political or not, yes, as Remember the 400, we do believe and we fight for constant progression of our communities, no matter what the political outcomes are. But at the same time, we do believe that, yes, when you're talking about politics, racism has always been a factor.
So come November 4th, I'm asking you now, E2K, the day after, perhaps we will know who the new president is going to be. What's next after that? What's next come November 4th?
What's next is we continue to push forward. So no matter who wins, Democrat, Republican, or any other person or party, no matter who it is, we continue to push forward and we continue to try and achieve our goals. And our goal is to end racism and heal the racial divide. That is the bottom line. So no matter what happens, we need to make sure that we keep the momentum going. And I think even being on shows like this and keeping that momentum going and having these conversations are helpful in order to make sure that policies are put into place in order to have real change that we can feel, and us as Black people to feel safe in our environments.
Just as Yonathan was saying, it resonates very, very closely here in Canada as well, as we certainly see it. It is such a pleasure speaking with both of you and getting your perspectives here. We will be covering things very, very closely over the next few days. Yonathan Kristina, Ezra Blair, known as E2K, thank you both very, very much. We'll speak again soon.
Thank you, Angie.